Welcome to the Parents of High Achieving Students podcast, where we talk education with parents, students, and educators. My name is Tim Pruney, and I am your host. Today, I have a special guest, Dr. Thom Reilly. Dr. Reilly is a former chancellor of the Nevada System of Higher Education. He's authored 5 books, including The Independent Voter and The Governance of Local Communities, and is currently a professor at Arizona State University's Watts College of Service and Community Solutions. Before we get started, Thom, this episode is brought to you by Prep Expert. Prep Expert is leading the way with online SAT and ACT prep and now offers one-on-one tutoring in over 100 academic subjects, including all of your AP courses and exams. Go to prepexpert.com and use the code podcast or podcast-TD. So Thom, what was it like being in charge of public college education for the entire state of Nevada?
Well, it was a fun job, but it was a bit challenging at times, balancing the interest of an elected Board of Regents, working with the legislature and the governor, as well as working with university presidents, faculty, and students.
And you said that you guys actually had an app that helped freshmen and incoming, high school seniors moving on to college.
We did, yeah. So the app was developed at Arizona State University called Me3. Actually, if you go to ASU or Google Me3, you can sign up for it. You can do it on your laptop or on your iPhone. And what it does is it helps students, both high school students as well as college students, identify potential career paths. So they ask you a series of questions that is based upon empirical research on career development. And then it ends up identifying your top 5 to 7 possible career opportunities that best match with your interest. From there, it identifies the various careers, looks at where the job market is nationally as well as in the state, in this case, Arizona or in Nevada, the average salary, and then it will point you to what type of degrees or certificates are available and at what institution. So in Nevada, say if healthcare or nursing pops up as a high interest, it'll identify the various schools throughout the state of Nevada and the programs that you would need to pursue in order to get that degree.
Nice. Are there any big blind spots that you find students tend to have when picking a major or picking a career?
Well, I think what Arizona State University has found is that the app was geared more towards high school students and their parents to help identify various possible career paths, but they found a high number of users were those that were freshmen and sophomore in college. So individuals that thought they identified the career path, but then start taking classes or start doing, in some cases, an internship, which is always very important to see, to give you real life experiences. They may find it's not something they're interested in. And so they begin a scramble, right, to look at other type of opportunities.
Yeah, it's better to identify it early because you can spend a lot of time working on one major, especially once you get that internship. That usually comes a little later down the path, right?
Well, yeah, traditionally that has been the case. A lot of higher institutions now are experiencing of at least doing a smaller or a brief internship at the beginning of your studies to give you that practical experience. So you're not waiting, as you just pointed out, to your junior or senior year for individuals to actually be immersed in their profession and then find out, gosh, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
So a lot of schools, UNR, for example, has those interested in robotics to start on that their freshman year. So they're getting real life experience on the issue of robotics in their freshman year. And others in Arizona State, for example, they have internships in public service during their freshman year.
Yeah.
So it exposes them in an early part of their career development as they're taking classes to ensure that that's a profession that they want to pursue.
Oh, that's smart. Is UNR big on robotics because they've got the Gigafactory right there?
It is. I mean, it's an increasingly popular career pathway for many young people. But yes, they have the ability to partnership with the private sector, which is always very exciting and offers students wonderful opportunities to engage.
Awesome. And all this, so ASU in Arizona developed the technology to make this decision process like earlier. And then who was it that was able to bring it to Nevada?
Yeah, so obviously I was from Arizona State University and knew of the kind of the innovative entrepreneurial reputation of ASU, particularly in online education and developing of apps. And so I approached the Jim and Beverly Rogers Foundation, which is located in Las Vegas, that is geared towards providing disadvantaged and at-risk youth opportunities to pursue higher education. They were very interested in the app. So they made a donation. The Nevada System of Higher Education partnered with Arizona State University to develop a specific app for Nevada. And that's how the Me3 instrument became available in the state of Nevada. And it's very specific, obviously, to Nevada.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome. Every state should probably get something like that eventually.
Yeah, and the earlier students and parents can start looking at that. I mean, if you think many individuals are in high school and beginning their career and, really panic that they're not really sure what they are good at or what they may be interested in. So beginning that exploration earlier, right? Even in junior high, but as freshman and sophomore in high school is really important. So you can start taking those type of classes that may best prepare you for your career choice.
No, that's so important. I personally have switched majors, especially as an undergrad. Once I was in grad school, I kind of knew my path, right? But how many years in undergrad was I like, between philosophy and engineering and geology, like bouncing back and forth to 100 different things before I kind of found my calling as an educator. Probably because I had so much interest in all those different things. It probably would have saved a lot of time and a lot of money. Not that I regret taking some of those higher level classes.
Sure.
Because, for me, I enjoy being a jack of all trades, but for students, especially that are taking on a lot of student debt or, if their parents are finance, you kind of want to find your path sooner rather than later, if possible.
Well, and then some universities are moving towards like USC, University of Southern California is a good example, that individuals entering the undergraduate get 2 degrees and they major 2 within the same period of 4 years. And that allows individuals to take, a degree in, say, engineering and then maybe anthropology or religion, diametrically opposite in some respects.
Yeah.
But to your point, I think that, if you look at those individuals that are exposed to various different sectors of society as well as different disciplines, I think in some cases are better equipped to solve some of the messy, intractable problems because they see how things fit together. So, even some disciplines and degrees may seem to be opposites. They're connected in some respect.
Yeah, and sometimes finding that niche, like that intersection between 2 seemingly opposite fields, it puts you in a unique position to be like, hey, I'm the person that does project management and like environmental and medical. So it's like, okay, like there's a million project managers out there. There's a million, environmental engineers, but you're the one that's like perfectly suited for that connection.
And same thing is for those that, may have an interest in the private sector, the nonprofit sector, the public sector. What we're seeing now, particularly with younger individuals, is moving back and forth between these different arenas.
Yeah.
One time I was a county manager and county executive for the Las Vegas area. And I know that we routinely hired individuals from the private sector to work in the public sector and vice versa.
Yeah.
They had a broader perspective many times and understood how the sectors work together, which are critical.
No, that's awesome. You're not just an administrator, you're actually a professor who teaches students as well, right?
It is. I've kind of went back and forth between academia as well as working. So yeah, I moved back to administrative roles. At one point, I ran the child welfare system in Nevada. I was, as I mentioned, the county executive, but then I've taught, and I've been an administrator and done research all along.
That's awesome. Like, so you're a living example of that, going back and forth between different sectors and wearing different hats in different times and being able to switch modes from educator to administrator to private sector. Is there anything that you wish your students, like wearing your professor hat for a second, that especially like freshmen coming in, that you wish they had learned, right? That maybe they had taken a class on or focused a bit more on while they were in high school. They're like, oh, if these freshmen had only done this, they'd probably be A students in college instead of B students.
Well, I think there's a couple areas. I mean, I think one area, obviously, that is important to success in higher education is becoming proficient in verbal and written communication. So that those type of skill sets that you should be learning all along are very important. And the more opportunities you have to become more proficient in those areas are important. The other areas, just prior to going into higher education, as well as going into higher education, is being able to complement your resume or with volunteer work or internships, right? So absent some, high-paying career jobs that are difficult to get at a very early age, you can always volunteer. And that separates, all right, that type of specific real-life experience really enriches your college experience, right? With examples that you can apply, the concepts from the classroom to the real world. And then the other thing is, I think sometimes, and this probably is more geared towards college students, is that, the first job you get out of college isn't necessarily the one you're going to remain in forever, right? So it's important to keep that in mind. And then when you're given opportunities, even if it is not what you thought was your ideal position, you gain experiences, right? You gain skills and knowledge that's transferable.
Yeah.
And the key is, how you transfer those skill sets and that knowledge skills from one sector to another.
Yeah.
Particularly the soft skills, because in higher education, we focus a lot on the hard skills. For example, in my field in public affairs and public administration, it's how to become a good administrator, human resource administrator, financial administrator. But the soft skills become more important, right? It's how you work with others, how you convince others to work together, that perhaps we don't spend a lot of time as much as we should, but are immensely important. Because the challenge you're going to face when you get out there, in addition to being good administrators, is how you manage money and people that don't belong to you. And that requires a skill set that you have to convince others, or you need others in order to accomplish your goal. And if you think of any intractable problem we're dealing with today, climate change, pollution, child abuse and neglect, homelessness, no one single agency is responsible for that, right? It's this coordinated effort of the public, nonprofit, and others, and other agencies working together to solve the problem. And if you work for me, it's a little easier for me to control your behavior, right? And outcomes. If you don't work for me and I need you, then I have to employ other type of skills, those soft skills that become immensely important.
Yeah. No, that's huge, actually. Soft skills. Do they teach? Like, is there a class on soft skills at
There's
all?
some, I think universities and colleges are realizing how very important that are, particularly when they're talking to partners in the community. Those in the private sector and those in the public sector, they're asking what skills and knowledge do we need from your students to be better prepared to work in our sector. You always hear writing and verbal expression.
Yeah.
And then, having those technical skills, which a lot of times they can teach you, but it's those soft skills, it's how to work with people and how to collaborate and how to do teamwork that are so essential that many find more challenging. So I think universities and colleges are spending more time in incorporating those type of skill set into the learning experience.
Nice. No, that's useful. So you've mentioned USC, ASU, so a lot of different colleges, the whole Nevada system. Are they pretty much all the same? Are there unique differences you see across different states or different types of universities, or private versus public, or community versus research?
Yeah, I think there are some, at least my real life experience has been in California, Arizona, and Nevada for higher education. And the Nevada system of higher education is somewhat unique in that all higher education is under one system, right? Community colleges, state college, the research institute, as well as the universities.
Yeah.
And in other places like California, you have three separate systems. You have a governing system over over the universities, a governing systems over the state colleges, and a governing system over community colleges. In Arizona, you don't really have the state, you have the three universities and the community colleges, but they're separate.
Yeah.
That's one distinct difference. In Nevada, it's because it's small, but you have all higher education under one system, which, makes, since many individuals start out in the community college, right? And they transfer, right? Their pathway to the university, it makes that a bit more seamless. The other major difference in Nevada than Arizona and California, Arizona and California, is that the higher education system in Nevada has a board of regents that's elected versus appointed. So most systems of higher education, you have regents that are appointed by the governor based upon their expertise in higher education. In Nevada, there are 13 regents and they're elected. So that creates a bit different model, a governance model, if you will.
Yeah.
And then the last difference I think I have noticed, and this is mainly separating Arizona from California and Nevada, is that the Arizona public system is mostly funded privately or through entrepreneurial areas. Nevada is heavily reliant on public funds. About 2/3 of their funding comes from the state.
Yeah.
In Arizona or Arizona State University, that's about 7%.
Oh, wow.
It's very small. That's because they have a robust online education. They have a lot of entrepreneurial or public-private partnerships.
Okay.
And they rely on a lot of international students. So I know as Chancellor of the Nevada System of Higher Education, one of the challenges we're facing is that how do we, wean ourselves off from, being so heavily reliant on state funding.
Yeah.
And develop more of those online programs as well as more of that entrepreneurial public-private partnerships.
Is that what makes Arizona so attractive to international students? That's something really interesting.
It is. I mean, Arizona State's been known for, it being the most innovative university, #1 nationally, right? So it has that title. So, I think they're a bit different models. They're still considered public institutions. And they're public institutions because it is their mission. And what is their mission? Their mission is to, provide access to education for individuals and then be part of the community, right? To solve problems in the community.
Yeah.
Arizona's philosophy is very similar to Nevada. And in Nevada, as well as in Arizona, if you qualify, you get in, right? Their institutions are deeply embedded in solving community problems. That's the role of the public institution. Arizona likes to say, and when I was chancellor, I adopted this in Nevada, is that they judge themselves on who they include and not who they exclude. That's pretty powerful because our ability to confront many of the challenges we have in the world is not by developing institutions that select a few and exclude individuals. If you take the top 0.5%, and then you look at your graduation rate, that's not necessarily such a remarkable feat. But if you accept everybody, right, who qualify, who are minimally qualified, that they have a right as a public institution, and you're able to compete academically and research-wise with others, it says a lot. So it's something that has drawn me to Arizona, but it's a similar philosophy in Nevada, is that if you qualify, you get in. Then the challenge is that how do you ensure that people are graduating, right? Because that's the true test. I got in trouble quite a few times in Nevada by saying that, a little bit of education is not necessarily that good. There's no research that suggests that a partial degree makes you any more competitive or marketable. And I would argue in some cases it puts you at a disadvantage, particularly if you've accumulated student debt. So if you get in, then the universities have an obligation to ensure that you graduate, right? That's where you see the difference in salaries and in jobs once you have the degree. But, celebrating the challenges that young people have, overcoming these challenges and becoming first generation students coming into the system is only part of the story. They need to follow up this story by saying how many of those first generation young people actually graduate.
That makes a lot of sense. What's the point of going to school if you're not going to finish your degree? Like half a degree, it sounds like it's almost worse than zero.
Because you have debt, right? And then you've not succeeded at something, right?
There's probably some psychological hit to that as well.
Sure. So, universities that invest in following, not only in attracting individuals to come to the university, but also ensure that they have the resources to be successful throughout their, time is very important.
No, that's really interesting, actually. Like one thing, and I don't want to get into the whole college rivalry thing. Like I know UNLV has a big one with UNR, but one thing that as I've been following more and more channels on like Harvard and MIT, they apparently have this rivalry where they say the biggest challenge of Harvard is getting in, and the biggest challenge of MIT is actually graduating. And that's something that MIT students sometimes say as kind of a slight to Harvard, as in like, we're harder to finish. But what you're saying is actually like, well, the school kind of is responsible for helping you finish because they're the school. That's their...
And they're taking your money. It's like, how do you judge success? I mean, if universities and colleges, that make no mistake, their number one responsibility is their graduation rates, as well as closing the achievement gap between various different ethnic and disadvantaged groups, and that, I think sometimes we've lost focus of that, we're not going to tackle our issues and challenges in this country and elsewhere by only selecting a tiny sliver of those who need higher education and then claiming success. It's the ability to increase that scale, right? That huge ability to educate a large number of individuals, right?
Yeah.
That's how we're going to address the issue, not just by taking a few of the best and the brightest and throwing them out in the economy. It's looking at how do we transform our economy by educating anyone that needs or wants to go into higher education. And higher education is not just a 4-year degree. Community colleges are powerful institutions that offer both certificates. For some individuals, they find out that they are successful and they can move on. They're a great pipeline. In fact, I would encourage many students to start in community colleges because they have smaller classes and more support to move forward. And for many of these certificates, in Nevada, for example, we don't have enough individuals to for HVAC, right? To work on air conditions, both in large scale at the airport as well as throughout Nevada. But individuals getting that HVAC 2-year degree, can make upwards of $100,000. These are very marketable, needed degrees. So when we look at higher education, it's not just this 4-year or higher degree. It's the community colleges are an integral part of a system. But make no mistake, there is a difference between those that don't have some type of higher education, whether it's a certificate or training, and those that don't. The statistics are very clear. Your pathway to move to the middle class, your pathway to have some, financial security is your ability to go on beyond high school. It's indisputable. But it doesn't have to be the 4-year degree. So going back to that central question is that it will be institutions like UNLV and UNR and Arizona State University and the community colleges that have this broad commitment to educating a large number of individuals to make them successful and enter the workforce. I know there's some great prestige to going to some of the Ivy League schools, but when you look at impact, it's those type of institutions that have this commitment to educating people in the community, and also being institutions that are doing research that is applied and is addressing the problems in the community, right? That is public institutions, that is their charge. It's not to do these theoretical, abstract research activities, but those that actually solve real problems. When I would have the institutions go to the legislature and convince legislators of the importance of research, right? Desert Research Institute, DRI, which is out there near UNLV, was always the most successful. Why? Because when they talked to legislators, they talked in common language that they understood. For example, we have developed, strategies to address water clarity, right, at Lake Mead and Lake Tahoe, because over the years that the clarity of the lakes have deteriorated and has impacted species and people got that, or that, up in drought-stricken areas, we're looking at cloud seeding, where we're actually, developing moisture and precipitation. Legislators got that, right? It was very concrete. They understood if we invest in research, we solve community problems.
And the water is a real problem.
Right. And that's what we need to do a better job at on universities, is convincing legislators of the importance of research. But research is grounded in increasing jobs in the community or solving those intractable problems, whether it's homelessness or breast cancer or other challenges that we face.
That makes a lot of sense. Going back to the certificate thing, it seems like that's an area where kind of community colleges have led the way, and some of the research institution, the prestigious schools are kind of following the community colleges lead on issuing more certificates for things that, maybe it's not a 4-year degree, but hey, if you take this 3-month or 9-month whatever certificate. Like it really adds value to the student, and a lot more, bigger schools are following the community's footsteps on that.
Yeah, and I think it's working with the private industry and developing those type of very specific skill base, right? And whether it's a certificate or a 2-year degree. And a lot of times those certificates or 2-year degrees are stackable, right? That you can do them, get those, but you can apply those towards your degree if you decide to move forward for a 2-year or 4-year degree, right? But that requires a close working relationship with the industry, right? So you're clear of what type of skill set, community colleges have been working with Apple and others, for example, in developing coding. Which is a very specific skill set, which a lot of young people that like computers and like those applications, you can find very lucrative and rewarding careers by getting a certificate or degree in that area.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because you need to know from the businesses, like what certificates are even going to be useful.
Right. Exactly.
And I know I had mentioned at the top that you're an author, and I'm actually in the process of writing my first book. It started off.
Congratulations.
Thanks. We're congratulate me when it's done. It started off as like how to ace the project management professional exam, and then it became kind of like a broader business book, especially like for team building, which I find hugely important. But what advice would you have, for me personally, but also young students that might be aspiring authors? You have like 5 books out. Like, how do you go from aspiring author, or you have a document that you're adding to actually crossing that finish line?
Well, a lot of it, began, I think, just in publishing, right, in articles in journals, which, in some respects is a bit more challenging depending upon which journal you have to publish in. But, one where, you have a passion about, which like you talk about, and some expertise, and you kind of have a clear, right, thesis of what you're attempting to do in the book, right? So, I mean, it's which, someone should be able to pick up that book and say, here's the question you're asking, right? And then what is it you're attempting to address, right? So, it can be a very challenging process. Getting a good publisher helps, right? They'll put you on a time frame and review chapters or the manuscript to give you some good insight on how to move forward. The latest book I have, which is being released in September by Routledge, is on the independent voter, and it's looking at nonpartisan politics, about how we expand nonpartisan politics, and who the independent voter is, which is now, Gallup has it anywhere between 44 and 50% of the electorate are now, particularly the majority of millennials are now not affiliated with the party. But in this book, I actually have 2 authors, which I've never had before.
Okay, so like a co-author.
Collaborating with 2 authors has been fun. I mean, they bring different perspectives. For example, one of my colleagues is not an academic. She has been in the field addressing independent politics, so it's kind of been on the front line. And the other one, Omar Ali, is a historian, an African-American historian. So it brings a unique perspective that you can address the central question, from 3 different perspectives or different disciplines. So it's not just public policy, it's grounded in real life as well as grounded in historical and sociological aspects.
Oh, that's awesome. Maybe a co-author. That's really interesting to have that, that other perspective.
Right.
But as a project manager, the fact that you have the publishing company give you the timeline, like, Well, duh. That's
Yeah.
that's covered in the
What
book.
helps stay on track, and they have tools and resources
Yeah.
to help you move forward on it. Yeah.
Someone emailing you. So, how's that chapter coming?
Exactly. Or
Accountability.
taking a look at it so they can give you some input on it.
Yeah, dude. Accountability. Another set of eyes. This is stuff that we preach to students all the time.
Sure.
Where can people find your books?
Oh, well, they're the different publishers, but I have a website, ThomReillyPublications.com, which has all my books and publications on it. Yeah, so people can look up there or Google me and they'll pop up my website. It's Thom with an H, makes it easy, THOM, and my last name REILLY. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll make sure to link to that along with the Me3 app.
Sure.
So what other advice, like, we're wrapping up now. So I want to give you a chance to have a final word on, like, what is your final piece of advice? What's the main thing? If you could just get one thing through students' heads, through parents' heads that you think would, benefit the students, benefit the families, benefit society, what would that message be?
Well, I think one is exploring early and often and being open to different experiences, right? And not to be rattled if your first idea of what you wanted to do doesn't pan out. Or that if you're entering college and high school and you're not really clear. I think, part of taking those courses and getting involved in volunteer work and in internships allow you to kind of form where your career path of interest will be. And it's not as easy just saying, I want to be an accountant. That taking different classes, a class or a project or an internship or a volunteer opportunity may spark an interest you never thought was there. And that may change over time, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Because your value of moving around and transferring that skill set, whether that's good communication skills or understanding budgets and being a good financial manager or learning to work in teams, those are all transferable, right, to one area to another. And I think that becomes key when you're trying to distinguish yourself in the career world, right? And how you bring value to an organization.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So,
thanks for having me, Tim. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on, everyone. This has been Dr. Thom Reilly. That's Thom with an H, THOM, professor at AFU, former chancellor of the Nevada System of Higher Education. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and go out there and work hard.
Okay. Thanks a lot.